Now you have nothing. All of your money, all of your possessions gone. Does the thought of that threaten you? Does it frighten you to think about losing everything you own? If so, then you probably love money. Because you see what you're doing is you're deriving your security from your stuff. You're placing your trust in your savings rather than in your Savior. Now, why do we do this? Why do we love money? Why is that our tendency? Well, I think it's perhaps partly because money promises us so much. Money promises us power, privilege, pleasure, prestige, and protection, to name a few. It promises power, first of all. If you have money, you have ability to purchase goods and services that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Same with privilege. It offers a privilege. You have an elite opportunity that the poorer people don't have to get some things. Money promises pleasure. There's a lot of fun things you can buy, a lot of fun things you can do if you have the money. It can promise prestige. You really could set yourself up as an important and a successful person if you have enough money. It also promises protection or security. If I have enough money, come what may, I can handle any contingency. Now, what's particularly surprising, I think, about this is that money really can do all of those things for us, except for the last one. It can't not provide protection. It doesn't matter how much money you have, you cannot secure yourself against car crashes and cancer and other tragedies. But the rest of them, it really can do. It can deliver all of that stuff on one condition: that the money holds out. But the crazy thing is, it never does. It never does. Proverbs chapter 23, it says, "Cast but a glance at riches, and they're gone, for they will certainly sprout wings and fly off like an eagle." And Jesus warns us in Matthew 6, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal." And so the Bible warns us that it doesn't matter if it's cash or if it's possessions, it's all vulnerable to loss, destruction, theft. It can all be taken away from us. But even if you manage to hold on to it, even if you manage to hold on to every last dollar, you can only do that for a time. The day you die, you must relinquish it. We're reminded of that in verse 7 today of the day's passage. We brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. And so quite simply, money promises all these things, and it can deliver those things as long as the money holds out. But it never does. It always fails us, eventually and always. The other reason, I think perhaps, that we tend to love money is because we really do believe that money and possessions will make us happy. I want to say a phrase. I'd like you to finish this phrase for me. There are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there's MasterCard. There's some things money can't buy. For everything else, there's MasterCard. I think that ad campaign was a stroke of genius. I think it was very, very clever. Because on the surface, it seems to be affirming a biblical truth that you cannot buy happiness. But at the same time, it subtly undermines that same truth by asserting that you have to have money in order to position yourself to receive that happiness. You have to have a lot of money to get into the place where you can experience that happiness, and maybe you need to have our product too. In spite of our phrase that we use a lot, you can't buy happiness, most of us don't really believe that. We don't. We really think it can. For example, every year, several magazines publish surveys they do to determine who are the most admired people in the world. Do you know who always ends up at the top of the list? Every time, without exception, the rich and the famous. Why? Because really, we all believe, many of us believe, that if I could just have as much money as Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, I would be happy. We really think that. Even though you and I know that's not true. And the fact that that's not true is now actually empirically verifiable. Do you know that there are a number of psychological and sociological studies that demonstrate that there is virtually no correlation between the degree of wealth and the degree of contentment and satisfaction in our lives? The studies actually bear this out. It also is verifiable by anecdotal evidence. For example, periodically our church sends a group of people on a mission trip to a third world country. For us, it's usually Mexico. And what I've noted over the years is that when the teams come back, they often say similar things. And whether they're adults or whether they're youth, many times the group is accosted by the poverty. Weren't prepared for the degree of poverty we encounter on that kind of a mission trip, and just astounded at what these people live without. And there's such a low standard of living. The other thing that often strikes people is that even though they have so much less than we do, they actually seemed happier than we are. So there's no necessary correlation between wealth and happiness. And yet, tragically, many people live their whole lives believing that not only does wealth equal happiness, but the amount of wealth necessary for such happiness is always just out of reach. If I could just have a little bit more, then I'd be happy. But listen to the words of Ecclesiastes 5. Whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. If you love money, if you desire to become wealthy, it's like being super, super thirsty and drinking ocean water. Salt water is not going to satisfy. The more you drink, the more you desire. It doesn't satisfy your thirst. It only intensifies the thirst. Whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. Well, what does this do to us? When we pursue wealth and we seek riches and we love money, what does that do? Well, in verses 9 and 10, it warns us that the desire to get rich inevitably leads to these kinds of things: temptation, a trap, foolish desires, harmful desires, ruin, destruction, all kinds of evil, and many griefs. Sound appealing? But it actually gets worse. Added to that list is apostasy. Money can actually lead us away from our faith altogether. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus was telling the parable of the various soils and the sower sowing seed. And the seed is an analogy of the condition of people's hearts. And listen to what he says. The one who received the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful. So Jesus is just making the observation that some people desire money, and that keeps them from desiring God, and they don't come to Jesus in the first place. And then today's passage in verse 10, we're told some people eager for money have wandered from the faith. These are brothers and sisters who once followed Jesus but really don't anymore. So the Bible warns us that the love of money can prevent some people from coming into the kingdom in the first place, and can actually derail brothers and sisters from following Jesus in the second place. You begin to feel how weighty this is. The love of money can actually lead to our eternal separation from God. Why? I want to ask the question, why is this so serious? Well, consider the words of Jesus. Jesus said rather famously, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." So Jesus is saying these are the most important two: love God, love people. The trouble is that when we want to get rich, we fulfill neither of those commandments. We do not love God or other people because we're busy loving money. We seek money more than we seek God. We're more concerned with our own pleasure and satisfaction and prosperity than with the good of our